Hey guys, welcome back to yet another episode of Pathgasm. In this episode, we will analyze what exactly went wrong with Iraq war so you can understand the context of what exactly went wrong with US strategies and how they analyzed the situation in a very bad fashion. So let's begin. It all started after 9/11 attacks when thousands of bodies surfaced on the US streets and the government has no answer for it whatsoever. So almost all the intelligence agencies knew that it came from Afghanistan from a group named Al-Qaeda led by Osama Bin Laden, and it was pretty much clear right from the start that it has to do with Afghanistani rebel groups that were practicing for taking revenge against these superpowers led by Osama Bin Laden, who was training them specifically to create chaos. But the thing was, the picture of Iraq came in place by this person named Paul Wolfowitz. He was a deputy secretary of defense at that particular point of time, and he suggested in his reports that Iraq was somewhere responsible for this whole execution of attacks. Now, all of the intelligence agencies were not agreeing to this point because they knew that Afghanistan and Iraq have not collaborated until that point of time, but he was quite confident with this assumption that he made out of nowhere. So just for the context, Saddam was a very brutal man who killed a lot of people, almost 250,000 plus people, and even conducted a genocide on his own people. So it was not like he was not capable of doing this kind of activity, but the truth was he was never involved in this particular act. So the question rises again, then why US government decided to point Iraq as their enemy? Well, the answer is quite complicated. So we have to remember this person, Paul Wolfowitz, once again, because he ultimately suggested the president that if they could capture the north and south part of the Iraq where most of its people lived, then they could easily restrict Saddam Hussein to Baghdad. So this was the major plan, and the benefit that was being extracted from this whole phenomena was to gain control over the oil reserves that was being held by Iraq. So after this math, they started to spread this rumor that Saddam Hussein has chemical weapons or mass destructive weapons that can ultimately lead to a massive disaster, and it is a threat to the whole world. And this propaganda was sold all across the globe on the news shows, on the TV shows, and everywhere. It was spread like and the fire. Reason why most of the nations believed this theory because Saddam was busy in making his army better and better. He was recruiting more people to the army, making the Iraq army number 4 in the whole world, and this is why this hoax was ultimately believed by most of the nations and powers in the world. It was basically the objective to make sure that when they charge in, it should be pretended that there is nothing wrong with this particular action of invading a country who is not even involved in the matter by any means. But anyways, in 2002, Resolution 1441 was passed to force Saddam Hussein and his sons to surrender the weapons within the 48 hours. And in the same process, they also got Britain on board just to ensure that they get proper support. So in March 2003, they landed on the soil of Iraq and started to take on different areas. Now, when they finally executed all of their plans, they dissolved the previous army just to ensure that the influence of Saddam Hussein gets eliminated from the armed forces. And this was the biggest mistake that they did. So now we have thousands of professional military soldiers who are now unemployed, and they started to hate US for this particular purpose. And remember that Al Qaeda was always active to provoke these kinds of groups, the people who were against these kinds of superpower. So what eventually happened was these people started to join the rebel groups, also called as Al Qaeda in Iraq, and which in future turned out to become ISIS. So what was the result? The result was that they never found such kinds of weapons, and in result they created a monster organization that is still haunting all of the major continents. Talking about the cost of this whole operation, it was about $1 trillion. And there is one more backstory to this, the whole rise of Al Qaeda and how Osama Bin Laden got in power. We'll narrate in any other episode. So this was just a short explanation of the whole Iraq war and why it happened and what was wrong with it. So if you like the content, make sure to subscribe the channel, and we'll make sure that you remain updated with valuable information. Also, we have a dedicated playlist for Afghanistan crisis in which we have explained all of the different phenomena that are working in that particular territory. Make sure to give it a watch as well.